Hey everyone, this is Ross, and this is a requested from Daughter's Boy, and he basically wanted to know a bit about foreground plants, what types are there, what are the best ones in my opinion, and yeah, so you just want to know a bit about them. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the foreground plants that you actually tie to rocks, and the ones that you can tie to mesh, and generally just the ones that you weigh down onto the bottom. Mosses are very popular as foreground plants. What you do with them, you just tie them a little pebbles, or you can tie them a mesh and weigh the mesh down somehow. Very nice little plant, quite low demands, doesn't need highlight, doesn't need any additional CO2. It does like a few nutrients, but yeah, it's not too picky. There is one downside to this plant, is that it doesn't grow very fast, and that it's just a quite slow grower. There's lots of different types of mosses. They're pretty much all related. They're all pretty similar, but I'll read them out anyways. If you just typed in aquatic moss on eBay, this is probably the things that would come up. Peacock moss, I've had that myself. It's very similar to Java moss. Same colour, same everything. And it's a bit cheap actually, so if you wanted cheap moss, just go with peacock moss. There's Christmas moss. I've never had that. There's flame moss, Taiwan moss, and yeah, there's many more, but that's all I really know, and that's all I've seen on eBay. So yeah, they've all pretty much got similar demands, not too hard to care for, slow growers. They're just chill plants, just chill out all day. There are other things that you can tie to rocks and have in mesh. Riccia fluteans is a relatively new plant to the hobby, but more and more people are using it because a famous aquascapist called Takashi Amano, he's Japanese, he uses it in a lot of his aquascapes. It's a bright green, beautiful colour, and it grows very low. It's a very nice plant, but the only problem with it is it requires high lights and additional CO2 and possibly fertilisers. So if you're prepared to give it all those things, it's not a bad plant. But if you just got a low light tank, you don't have any additional CO2, it's not going to grow very well, and it might just melt away and die. You could give it a try, but I wouldn't personally do it. Only if you've got all the equipment, then you could do it. So yeah, I'd stick with good hardy mosses like peacock moss and Java moss if you just want a simple tank. So they were just the plants that you tie to rocks and mesh. The stuff that you plant in the substrate, there's lots of different things. I'm not going to go into all of them. I'm not really going to give you the Latin names. There's dwarf sage, which is personally my favourite. It doesn't grow too low to the substrate. It grows a few inches off it, but it's still classed as a foreground plant. And I quite like it. It's a fast grower, it gives off runners to new little plants, it doesn't need too high of a light, it doesn't need any additional CO2, and it does great in a dirt substrate. So I'd recommend dwarf sage if you haven't got any. Actually, all sage is pretty much good, even giant sage, it's just great. There's dwarf hairgrass. I've heard very good things about that. I've never actually had it, but apparently it grows really fast. It might need quite high light levels, but it is a good plant if you give it high light. Possibly CO2, although it isn't too necessary. So as long as you give it high light, it should be okay. And yeah, it's a very nice plant. It actually resembles proper grass. But if you don't want to give them high light, then just give them dwarf sage. It's a good alternative, good cheap alternative. There's glossostigma, otherwise known as glosso. That generally requires high light and maybe CO2. The lower light levels you give it, the taller it grows. If you give it T5s, then it'll grow very low to the substrate and it'll look a bit better. It is very bright green, so it looks good. It looks a lot better than moss, but yeah, you've got to put time into it, trim it when it gets too thick. It's kind of a fussy plant, so people who disagree, people have got different opinions on it, but yeah, it needs higher light to stay closer to the substrate. If you just give it low light, then it might actually grow to the surface. So yeah, I don't really like Glossa stigma. There's dwarf baby tears, otherwise known as Hamantheus cuba. I've had that before. It melted as soon as I put it in. It just died away. Even with this dirt, it just completely died on us. If you're gonna get that, then I'd recommend highlight levels and CO2 and a good substrate, because that is a pretty fussy plant. And yeah, you've got to watch out for poo and bits of detritus being trapped in the small leaves, because that'll kill it as well if it doesn't get enough light. So yeah, I don't really like that plant. You can give it a go if you've got CO2 and bright lights, but yeah, I wouldn't really get it again. I've heard ordinary baby tears is good though. It'll survive in just dirt and medium to high light. So I might try some of that. I hear it's quite good, and it remains quite low to the substrate. Stargrass, great plant. I've had that before. If you trim it regularly, it'll stay quite close to the substrate. If you don't trim it very regularly, then you'll get an odd strand that goes to the top, which doesn't look too bad, I suppose. But yeah, just trim it every now and again. Just make sure it doesn't go too high. Most of the time it'll spread out rather than grow up. It's just in case, really. So that's all I really knew on actual planted foreground plants. So for the foreground plants that you tie to rocks, I'd go with peacock moss or Java moss. And for the actual planted ones, I'd go with dwarf sage or stargrass. Great plants. So that's pretty much all I know on foreground plants. So I hope this has helped, and if you like this vid, then please comment, rate and subscribe. Bye.